ended up getting trained by Buddy Wayne and Davey Richards as well. That's where I think I kind of really polished and figured things out. I was lucky enough that they brought in Fit Finlay. That was probably the first time that I really got to wrestle outside my depth. Everybody wanted to be a tough guy. I really wanted kind of a wimpy character. There's 50 of these guys on the show. Yeah. I want to be different. I made being paired up with Mike Santiago as the Amerikan Gunz. First time we've gotten to work with a vet who was really just down to go out there and work. Yeah, it was an absolute blast. Him and Mark were the nicest human beings. He just really figured out how to carve out their own space. I got the opportunity to go over to Khali's in India and coach. It was also just, I think, fascinating getting to just hang out with Great Khali. Truly one of the most low-key funny people. And my grandmother is in the front row and swings her cane at him.
Ladies and gentlemen, hosted by Coach C, Chris Sanders, this is Best for Business.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Another episode of Best for Business. I'm pumped for this one. Ethan HD, man, thank you so much for joining me for this one.
That's an honor and a pleasure, my man. Appreciate you.
I can't wait for this one. Now, what I told you first, I'm from New England, so obviously you're from a different area, but I'm curious for you, pro wrestling for you, what was it about pro wrestling that made you want to make that jump for pro wrestling?
Man, I'll be honest, I don't think there was anything else I ever wanted to do. I got into professional wrestling probably around 6 or 7 and was just obsessed with it. I think that's how most people end up falling in love with it, is you just see it as a kid, and it's this thing that feels very real and very unattainable at the same time. You see it on TV, you know that Roddy Piper and Stone Cold are they're real people, but it's trying to figure out but what is the path to get there? And so, yeah, even from a young age, I think this is all I ever truly wanted to do.
So when you talk about the figures being larger than life, I'm curious, who was Ethan HD's guys growing up? Who are your favorites?
Honestly, all over the place. I think the first wrestler I was really, really into was probably The Rock. And I think for most people, you gravitate towards whoever's at the top of the card. And then as I got more and more into it, the Road Dogg became one of my favorites, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero. I think I ended up later on gravitating towards more of the cruiserweights, the quicker guys. But yeah, early on, The Rock was probably my guy.
So you talk about your life, pro wrestling, there's no other option. So for you, I'm curious, how do you make that jump to transition into pro wrestling? Did you have an athletic background prior to this?
Kind of.
Okay.
I'm not a very competitive person, and so sports were never my forte, but I was athletic. My friends always had trampolines. We would do flips on them. We'd ride our bikes, run around. And so honestly, I guess kind of. I always stayed in shape and was always willing to try different things. But yeah, I wouldn't say I was inherently an athlete.
Yeah. So how do you go to pro wrestling in your area?
So when I started wrestling, there was a school in a warehouse in Auburn, Washington, and I learned kind of the basics there. It probably wasn't the best school to learn from at the time. At the time, it was when you're picking out a wrestling school, you don't know what.
Yeah.
What a good trainer is, what a bad trainer is. You just assume if somebody has a school, they know what they're doing. And then later, I ended up getting trained by Buddy Wayne, who's a local legend around here, father of AEW's Nick Wayne, and Davey Richards as well. And so that's where I think I kind of really polished and figured things out. But now there's a ton of great schools in the Northwest. Actually, I'm here right now at the Grit City Wrestling School I coach at here in Tacoma, Washington.
Nice.
Portland has the Oregon Pro Wrestling School. Vancouver, BC has Lionsgate. There's a few others in the area, but yeah, it's crazy how it went from Buddy Wayne's was kind of the only school in Washington you could learn from in the Northwest. And now there's 3 or 4 really good schools to learn from.
Nice. So when you talk about Wayne and Richards, I'm curious for you, what are the biggest lessons you feel they taught you?
Man, I think from Buddy, I learned that the moves don't matter. And in a sense, I think they do. The moves are that's what makes you you.
Yeah.
But in the same way that if you want to be a rock star, the chords don't matter. It's how you play them. It's the intensity you play them with. And that's the thing I learned from Buddy really quickly was the moves don't matter. Figure out your footwork, your tempo, what are the things that are intrinsically you? And I think from Davey, I just learned how to like look at wrestling as not necessarily a sport, but it's a show about a sport.
Yeah.
And it still needs to look like you're being competitive in there, even though obviously we're not really trying to win. But to be able to uphold that air of realism, like like when you watch like a football movie, you can tell pretty quick like if the football itself looks like football you've seen, or if it's like Disney Channel football where it's kind of
Yeah.
like they're just in suits kind of running around versus like yeah when you see them taking the hits and you're like oh snap like they this feels like a football you're more immersed in.
Yeah. So when you talk about learning from Buddy, I'm curious right now, what would you say is like a strong point for the Washington wrestling scene in general? Obviously, you said at first it was just Buddy, and now it's grown even more. But is there anything that stands out wrestling there, you think?
Man, that's a good question. You mean as far as kind of like the wrestling scene or
Yeah, I'm
like
curious
why
to
there's
see
so many
because
good
you've
scenes?
wrestled all over, but I'm curious for Washington specifically. Is there anything that stands out, you think?
Oh, definitely. Like as far as schools, like the Buddy Wayne Academy is still tremendous. Like I think Grit City Wrestling, so obviously I'm a bit biased, but
Yeah.
the Grit City Wrestling School, I think has done a really good job like these last couple of years of just putting out like really good talent. I think a lot of it is wrestling schools when we first started were like very fly by night. Like in the early 2000s, they would pop up, the guys would whoever ran it would kind of get their money and peace out. There's like a few exceptions to that rule, and I think as the people who grew up in that era and came out of that era, we figured out that like, oh, if we're going to have a wrestling school and really focus on building up the next generation, it's not putting talent out before they're ready instead of just being like, oh, this person's been here 12 months or this person paid up, like time to get them out. Wrestling schools around here are a lot pickier and
Mm.
about putting our students out there. And part of that is for our own reputation. Part of that is for their reputation. Like
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that when you have your first match, people should be amazed that that's your first match. You should wrestle better than your experience lets on. Because if you go out there and your match is so or it's terrible, and people go, how long have you been training? You go, it's my first match. I go, okay. And then they kind of write you off. But if you go out there and have like a killer match and people go, oh, how long have you been working? And you go, actually, that was my first match. You're like, oh, you're a goddamn prodigy. That was your first match. You're
Yeah.
tremendous. And I think that's kind of the mindset a lot of the wrestling schools around here have taken to. And so I think it, maybe it just appears that the wrestling schools are better than they are because we only let people see the good ones.
Yeah.
But I think in a way it's better for us and it's better for the students that when they do put themselves out there, that people are impressed and want to use them more instead of kind of writing them off.
Yeah. So you talk about first match. What was Ethan HD's first match?
Oh my God, my first match was like late October 2005.
Okay.
Say it was like the 28th or the 29th. Um, I was so nervous that I like almost basically went deaf during the match.
Wow.
Like I know the person I was working with was calling spots to me,
Yeah.
and like I just couldn't process it. Like I knew they were speaking, but I just couldn't hear them. I couldn't take it in, and I remember like years after watching it back, and it wasn't the disaster that I thought it would be. Like it's a little more passable than I imagined. I think the highlight was my grandmother was there, and she grew up in the era of Gorgeous George and like going to shows at the Grand Olympic Auditorium, and she like never really got smartened up that wrestling's a work. Like to some extent, she kind of knew it was,
Yeah.
but in a lot of ways, she didn't know. And so after my match, I got the finish was like a hit with brass knuckles, and the guy's leaving the ring going to celebrate, and my grandmother is in the front row and swings her cane at him, and like misses the back of his head by like a hair.
Wow.
And I remember my mom calling me when I got to the dressing room, and she's like, "You need to get on the phone with your grandmother right now." And I'm like calling my grandma in the locker room, which is like the least cool thing
Yeah.
you can do is call your nana and be like, "Hey, I'm okay."
Yeah.
And she's like, "I need you to come down here. Like, I know you're bleeding." And I'm like, "I'm not bleeding. Like, I'm fine." And
Yeah.
like, I ended up having to like sneak out the back and like visit my grandmother in the parking lot in the middle of
Wow.
the show. Like I'm okay. Like I live.
Yeah.
Um, but because she took it so seriously, after that, she never came to another show. And so when I would see her, she would just ask if I won my last match, and I would always tell her yes. And I'm convinced that like until the day she passed. She thought I had like the greatest win-loss record in wrestling history.
Wow.
That like aside from that first match, I was undefeated in the sport.
Wow, what a record. I'm curious for your career when we talk about first. So you, what would you say is Ethan HC's first big opportunity in wrestling?
Oh wow, that's a ooh. There's been a few. I think
Okay.
the first opportunity I had, I think to really like level up as a wrestler is there was this company in Portland. They're still around. I should say it was, but there's a company in Portland, DOA, and at the time they were starting to bring in outside talent and bringing them in specifically to work with younger guys. Like they would bring in Christopher Daniels and he would do a seminar, and then on the show he would wrestle somebody. And I was lucky enough that they brought in Fit Finlay, and Fit Finlay did a seminar, and then the main event was going to be me and Fit, and that was probably the first time that I like really got to wrestle outside my depth. That you're not just wrestling guys that are like good on a local level
Yeah.
or guys that like, oh, they were good, like 10, 20 years ago, and now they're kind of on the downside of their career. This was like Fit Finlay, like he had just gotten released. I think there was like a thing with the national anthem or something, but he was still actively on television up until he got released.
Hmm.
And so he was still like fresh and ready to go. And that was like the first time I got to really wrestle like well outside my depth.
Yeah.
And you get a real scope of like, oh man, like there's good, and then there's like, oh, Fit Finlay, I could do this in my sleep good. Like, I'm sitting here stressing over every little thing,
Yeah.
and he's just casually warming up like it's another day at the office.
Yeah. How was that match?
It was great. I think the biggest
Nice.
lesson I took away was because I was so nervous going in, and you
Yeah.
you hear these stories about like how much of a hard ass Fit Finlay is. Because he's a legitimately tough guy.
Yeah.
And I was very like putting the match together, like, oh, whatever you want to do is cool. And he would ask me like, well, what do you want to do? And I'd be like, well, kind of sheepishly, like, well, I do this thing. He's like, okay, yeah, we'll do that, here. Cool. And I really wish I would have advocated for myself more. I was so nervous about screwing up in front of Fit Finlay. And afterwards, and he kind of said it in not so many words. He's like, just let's have the match you want to have. Like, you're not going to screw up in a meaningful way that I can't fix. Like
Yeah.
you're the best hands you could be in.
Wow.
And after that was when I really learned like, oh, like when you're in the ring with somebody who's like good, like you need to be like almost the opposite of apprehensive. And I don't mean like walk in there and tell them like, hey man, here's what we're doing. Like,
Yeah.
plug your stuff in where it fits. But like be open to advocate and go like, I have ideas and things like that. And really just put it out there. Because again, he was very open and receptive. And clearly like in hindsight, I could have pitched more ideas, but I was just so nervous going into it.
Yeah.
But that was, yeah, I think the biggest lesson I took away like that, and really just like how slow you can get away with moving and wrestling.
Yeah.
Like really just taking your time with stuff. And yeah, I think those were like my biggest takeaways.
Nice. So when you talk about your career, I was doing research last night. You have an absolute stacked career, but I'm curious for you, what is the inspiration you think, or is there a future for Ethan HC himself?
Like as far as what my future in wrestling is.
Like everything for like the way you present yourself in the ring to the gear to all that stuff.
Oh man, it's evolved over the years.
Okay.
Initially, the Ethan HD character, I really wanted kind of a wimpy character. Like everybody wanted to be a tough guy. Everybody was like trying to be a badass, and I was like, well, then what's the opposite? Like, there's 50 of these guys on the show. I want to
Yeah.
be different, and I'm a big fan of Jim Breaks, who was like this like world of sport wrestler, and he was just like a crybaby, and I was like, that's the way to go. And so I started piecing the gimmick together by year. And at the time, I had like short brown hair and like a bit of a mustache, and I was doing extra talent for the WWE. And it was when Carlito and Primo were the tag team champions. And we just happened to like pass each other in catering. And we did that thing when like you look at somebody and you realize you're both wearing the same shirt.
Yeah.
It was that, but it was our faces.
Yeah.
We were like, I like we looked at each other and we're immediately like, oh, you're just me, but like a little bit different.
Yeah.
And we like introduced ourselves, and then like as we're parting, somebody who's just like crew walked up and was like, "Oh, you guys could be twins." And I immediately like that next week, like went out, like buzzed it, got like bleached it completely blonde, grew out like a full mustache goatee, and yeah, just really started piecing together like what being a wimp is. And then later on, it kind of evolved into like, I feel like there's a point where you have to like have an edge, like especially as like I got put in more main events around here. Like the main event needs to feel like a fight. People need to
Yeah.
believe that it's a fight. And so I started just getting a bit of an edge and starting like, well, what's somebody who's afraid of fighting? Like, what would they do? And so I started looking into like I got pepper spray and like started using like plastic bags to smother people,
Yeah.
just wild stuff because I had portrayed myself as kind of like a coward this whole time. So I was like, well, I need to figure out a way to be a present danger. And it, like that to me was like, well, this makes the most logical sense if I'm a crowd member watching.
Yeah.
And so evolved with that. And then later we ended up, I made me paired up with Mike Santiago as the American Gunz. And that was the point where we just went out there and we were just kind of like aren't totally brainbustersing it.
Yeah.
Um, at the time when we Defy started, I think is also when we really figured out what the aesthetic was. And
Okay.
so we kind of leaned into like the Antifa sort of like black, the bandanas over the face,
Yeah.
and bless the Defiance, like they leaned all the way into it. They were on board with all of it, and so that really helped. And so yeah, I think like the persona over the years has kind of evolved. I'm always trying to figure out what everybody else is doing, and then how can I do the opposite, but still get booked on the show.
Yeah. So when you talk about team, and I'm curious, what was it like to win the Defy Wrestling Tag Team Champions with Mike?
It was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Like from day one, we were kind of the de facto team, and initially we were really portrayed as heels.
Okay.
And I think over time we were the constant, and I think it's the same thing with like anybody who's a villain. Like you look at horror movies, and over time Jason kind of becomes the character you root
Yeah.
for, Freddy Krueger becomes the character you root for. And I think because we were the constant in this rotating cast of wrestlers coming in from like New Japan or Mexico or whatever, they just really got behind us. And what's funny is we had built this tournament up, and the finals was supposed to take place, and the guys were supposed to wrestle in the finals, Artemis Spencer and Billy Swade. They're coming from Canada, and they ended up getting held up at the border. And so, literally, like a couple hours before we're supposed to go out, they made the call to be like, okay, you guys are going to wrestle Brody King and Tyler Bateman. And we just, in maybe half an hour, got the light that like this is happening. They're for sure not coming across the border. Figure it out. And Brody and Tyler had already wrestled that night. So like it was really figuring out like
Yeah.
not only like what do we do in this scenario, but how do we not do with them what they just saw? Like how do we present them again in a different way so the crowd doesn't see it coming?
Wow. What was that match like? How did you able to do that?
I mean, luckily, I mean, Brody's an absolute pro.
Yeah.
Tyler Bateman's an absolute pro. And I mean, also just we'd worked with each other before.
Nice.
And so we're just very familiar with each other's stuff. And I loved it because it was truly, we both understood what the outline is. We understood what the game plan was. And it was truly just like, we'll do this, and this. I will be honest, sheepishly, part of me was like, if I can avoid getting chopped by Brody, this whole match. Like that was really my goal
Yeah.
was like don't get chopped by Brody.
Yeah.
And not that I'm inherently anti chops, but I had just been tanning, and so it was just like very like
Yeah.
not sunburnt, but like the skin is still in that healing process. And I was like, if I could avoid taking a chop or two, I ended up taking a few, which is it's the nature of the beast.
So when you talk Ethan
But
HD and tag team wrestling, I'm curious to you, what does it mean to be a four-time WCWC Tag Team Champion?
man, I'll be honest. I learned a lot at my time in WCWC.
Nice.
A lot of it was they were the first company in the area to get like regular like weekly television,
Nice. Yeah, that was
and
hard to see at first.
yeah, and it just wasn't a thing, and it was on like a local like network affiliate, so it wasn't hard to find. We weren't like lost in the ether of public access, and the only real drawback was there was only ever like a handful of teams at any given time. And there was probably like an 8 month span where it was us and this other tag team, the Whirlwind Gentlemen, just trading the belts back and forth. And you just learn how to get creative, how to change things up,
Yeah.
start really being like, what haven't we done? But it's great because we also got to learn how to plant the seeds for things later on instead of just going, this is your match for the night. Now it's like we're doing 4 weeks of television or sometimes even like 8 weeks of TV. And so you're sitting down and going like, okay, well, if we're headed here, then let's do this here, and then we'll make a callback to it here, or like if we beat you guys with this on this taping, how about you catch us trying to use it, on the
Yeah.
next down the line, and then maybe like the blow off, you guys can use that on us. And we really got to start telling these really long stories. We also got very lucky early on when they were trying to establish the division. We got paired up. It was me and Mike against Mikey O'Shea and Gangrel. And Gangrel was rad because, like, I mean, obviously, absolutely, like the veteran out of the four of us, but like also the most down for
Nice.
anything out of the four of us. Like, this is the guy who's like, yeah, give me a clothesline on the floor, like knock me off the apron through a table, and it was cool because it was probably like other than Finley, like the first time like we've gotten to work with like a vet who was like really just down to go out there and work,
Yeah.
like because like again, like we came in like early 2000s when we started was that era of guys would like come off TV and it was almost like their goal was to do as little as possible. And Gangrel was like the 180, like the opposite of that, where it was just I need to prove that I can still hang with these guys and I can still go. And by God, did he prove it every single goddamn time.
Yeah. When you look at your career goes beyond wrestling. It's a little bit of acting, I guess. What was it like to be in the indie film The Ultimate Deathmatch?
Oh my God. So that was an experience.
Yeah.
We got a message from, I want to say it was Matt Farmer, who's one of the owners of Defy now.
Okay.
And he had got in touch with this local director and he basically wanted to shoot this wrestling movie. And he like emailed us the script and was like, here's your role. Like, this is the role you'll be playing. And the concept, for if you haven't seen the movie, which bless you, the concept of the movie is this wrestling company has a wrestler die, and it's their high spot pay per view. So they're going to do an illegal stream pay per view where the only way to win the tournament is to kill your opponent. And in the script, it's written as if every round you could only win by killing your opponent. But then when they later edit it, it's just the finals is you have to kill. But nobody told us this. And so we were going out there into having these matches and being told, like, hey, just go out there, wrestle like 12 minutes, and
Yeah.
then we're going to cut it down to 3 minutes of whatever. And the finish was the really important thing. Everything else was just kind of footage we can like B roll.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was the second day of shooting never happened. And so they ended up just airing all of the matches in their entirety.
Okay.
And like they're okay to some extent, but like there's no real psychology to it. So we're just going out there and kind of just stringing stuff together because we're like, it's all going to get chopped up.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter. And so it's just these like kind of just like meandering matches of high spots and moves. And then it just ends with like somebody getting strangled. Like I got like choked to death with like a bike chain was like how I get
Wow.
killed off.
Yeah.
And I think really maybe the highlight of it is like Al Snow was brought on as a commentator.
Nice.
And I remember like looking at like his like script or whatever, and he's just got like a lot of just cutaways to him. And instead there's a lot of him just burying people. Like he like hits his four lines, and then it's him kind of just shitting on everything else. And part of me wishes more of that would have made the cut. Like I think
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
live Alston riff track of like a
Amazing.
so-so indie show would have been a much better film.
Yeah. So when I look at your career, you've got to do some cool things and wrestle some cool people. There's a few matches I want to ask you about, if you have any brief stories or anything. The first one, do you have anything that stands out wrestling Chavo Guerrero?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another example of I wish I would have just committed to like I had an idea.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
had met Chavo before, didn't know him from Adam. And at the time I had short blonde hair.
Hmm.
And I remember like kind of offhandedly telling a friend, like, oh, it'd be funny if I showed up dressed like Kerwin White and like see what happened because nobody had done it.
Yeah.
And I like, and at the time he was doing like stunt work for Glows. He wasn't doing a lot of bookings, so this was kind of like a unique opportunity. And like Eddie Guerrero is probably like my all time favorite.
Nice.
So there was also that, and I kind of regret it. Like I ended up talking myself out of it because at the time when Eddie had passed, he was doing the Kerwin White character, and I was like, well, I don't want my first impression to be like, hey, I know this you do this gimmick at a real tragic time in your life. How about we
Yeah.
joke about it? But then I went out there, and people obviously see Chavo. They see me with blonde hair, being like a brown guy, and they're like, "Oh, you're wrestling Kerwin White." And Chavo went along with it, and I kind of
Wow.
wish I would have been like, "Ah, punch." I should have just like, yeah, I
Yeah.
should have gone along with it. But the match itself was great, and it
Nice.
was it was again, it was an example of Chavo being a guy who's like, can work with anybody, but again, doesn't know me from Adam. And so before we get into the match, he keeps kind of asking me, I think, kind of like questions to kind of test things out and see like how, or like what my wrestling acumen is. So he's like coming up to me, he's like, hey, is it cool if we like call it all in the ring? And I was like, oh, sure, that's fine. Yeah, like, yeah, I mean, we can do this for this, we can do this for this, and then we'll figure the rest out. And he's like, cool, cool, sounds good. And then he would like come back like 5 minutes later and he'd be like, you ever work with like so and so? And be like, oh no, I haven't. You ever work with this guy? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've worked with them. Like, oh, cool, cool, cool. And just that. And then he, after a while, I think he kind of was like, okay. And he would come up to me and he'd be like, all right, we're gonna do this, this, and this for the finish. I'm like, cool, sounds good, man. I'll see you out there. And then he'd come
Nice.
back 5 minutes later. Hey, man, like anything you want to do? Like, you got anything big you want to hit? Like, what's your big policy? And I'm like, oh, I'll do this. And it would just he would just come back like every few minutes and just like
Nice.
add a little more, add a
Yeah.
little more. And then I think my favorite part is we had 12 minutes and we put this match together and I'm like, oh man, we're gonna go out there and kill it. And we have 12 minutes. And so we're just chain wrestling, just working around. We haven't even gotten to any of the stuff we've called yet. And the referee comes over to us and he's like, you guys got 2 minutes.
Wow.
And Chavo looks up at him. And in my head, I'm like, well, we almost had a good match. I mean, we had a fine match, but in my head, I'm like, we got to take it home. 2 minutes left. Like, in my head, I'm getting ready, like, how do we get into the finish?
Yeah.
And so the ref's like, yeah, you guys got 2 minutes. And Chavo's like, 2 minutes left? And the referee's like, yeah, you got 2 minutes left. And Chavo goes, F that. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
And then we just went like another like 10, like got
Wow.
it, like
Yeah.
did all the stuff. But yeah, I had a great time. And
Nice.
again, it was just like nice being in there with somebody who's just chill and relaxed, was receptive to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an absolute blast.
Yeah. So when I talk about your career, I'm curious, what was it like for you to wrestle the Briscoe brothers?
And that's another one where like Defy in general gave me like so many just matches I didn't think would happen. And the
Uh-huh.
Briscoes was definitely on that list of matches that I never thought would happen. I know early Defy people had floated out like Amerikan Gunz versus Briscoes would be kind of like a cool dream match.
Yeah.
And we almost got there. It was me and Shaq. My Santiago was on hiatus at the
Okay.
time. But again, it was so cool. And like I know that like there was a lot of like unfavorable things that like Jay had said in the past. And so I know like even going into it, some folks were a little apprehensive. Um, and I can only speak from my experience.
Yeah.
Him and Mark were the nicest human beings.
Nice.
Like as soon as they found out like we were working, went up, introduced themselves, started talking like we'd known each other forever.
Nice.
We're just so open and down for any ideas we had, and it was just a really cool collaborative effort. And again, I as somebody who grew up, like watching '90s wrestling, and then you bleeds into like getting into indie wrestling in the early 2000s, and the Briscoes were like one of the tag teams
Yeah.
in the early 2000s. Like you like get any tape, and it was either Briscoes and SATs, Briscoes and Backseat Boys, or
Yeah.
Briscoes and whoever. But like they were like a mainstay in
Yeah.
that tag division, and so getting a chance to wrestle them was just so cool and like weirdly kind of surreal. Like that, it's like, oh, this is happening, and it's
Yeah.
happening at Defy, where like the crowd's like really behind us, they're really behind the Briscoes, and so yeah, it was truly one of my favorite tag matches of all time.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you say Defy, how did your opportunity come to start at Defy?
I got lucky at the time. I was kind of a staple of the Northwest scene.
Nice.
And it's funny, like right before Defy started, I was thinking about quitting wrestling or like taking like an extended hiatus.
Wow.
Because right before that, I was wrestling on just about every show, and I held four titles in the area across like four different promotions.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, this is as good as it gets. Like at the time, nobody was flying talent out from the Northwest, and I was like, if this is where I peak, cool, man. I'm not going to spin my tires. I'm going to go do something
Yeah.
else. And I ended up running a few shows just to kind of like entertain myself, but also I wanted this proof of concept that like wrestling could work in Washington State because there really wasn't a lot of wrestling in the state.
Yeah.
And Jim Perry, one of the founders of Defy, came to one of those shows, and we ended up hanging out at Denny's afterwards for like 3 hours. And he had this idea for Defy, and I was like, dude, keep me in the loop. I would, you seem like you have your head on straight, and you have
Yeah.
a game plan of how you want to enact this. And so he puts the show together. He reaches out to me, and he's like, hey, I'm doing the thing. I'd love to have you on it. And I go, I'm leaving for India. Like
Wow.
I'm leaving Arabia for 6 months,
Yeah.
and I got lucky enough that my trip out got delayed a month, and so I was able to do the very first Defy show.
Nice.
And then it was kind of like interesting being in that bubble, seeing like, oh man, like they sold out Washington Hall. You know, you had Cody Rhodes, Swerve Strickland, Davey Richards, all these guys here. And now I'm in India, like watching this thing like
Yeah.
blow up. And I'm like, please God, like let me be a part of this when I get back. And I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, it was an awesome experience. And it was truly like what like the Seattle wrestling scene needed.
Wow. Is there a match from Defy that stands out to you, you think, that you've had?
Yes, I think there's two.
Okay.
One is me and Santiago. We had the American Guns
Yeah.
versus Moustache Mountain. We had Russell
Nice.
Trent Seven and Tyler Bate, and it was kind of lost footage at the time because it was right when NXT UK was starting. And I don't know how inside baseball you want me to get, but at the time it was basically they were contracted, and I could be getting some of the details wrong, but essentially we could have the match, but they couldn't stream the match live
Yeah.
or show it on the internet. It had to be just for the live crowd. And so we went out there and had this like absolute banger. And it was kind of for a long time, like if you weren't there to see it live, it was just lost footage. Like
Wow.
there was not even a lot of it other than a few cell phone videos ever even came out. And that was probably like that's one of my favorites. And then I think my favorite singles, I wrestled Artemis Spencer in the main event for the Defy World Championship. And I remember being so anxious
Hmm.
because right before us was Ultimo Dragon versus Matt Cross,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
going into the show, me and Arta both assumed that was the main event.
Uh-huh.
And then when we found out we had to go on after them, it was like, oh man, like we got to flood all the stops. And
Yeah.
again, it was one of those like time to level up. You know, they have just seen everything. You know, it's Defy. Everybody does everything
Yeah,
and
yeah.
does it incredibly well. On top of that, they just saw Ultimo Dragon make a rare U.S. appearance against Matt Cross, one of the most established indie guys in the world. And then it was go out there and top that. And I like to believe we did. The crowd
Nice.
definitely convinced us that we did. And it was great because it was truly just pulling out all the stops and just being two guys who were just kind of tent poles of the Northwest scene, headlining this show in front of a sold out crowd with all these names from like Japan and Mexico and the US. And I'm very proud of that. I think that was like, I can do this at this upper echelon, no questions asked.
Yeah. So when you talk about standing out, I'm curious, is there anything to you at least that stands out wrestling in Canada?
Yeah, right now there's NEW,
Okay.
which is probably like one of the bigger ones. There's also Dusk Pro Wrestling,
No.
which is a lot more character driven, gimmick driven.
Nice. Okay.
The wrestling's still tremendous. I mean, don't get me wrong, but like it's definitely like Abraham Lincoln is on their roster.
I
So like
love it. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that kind of a vibe. But it's also like Brady Malibu is one of the people behind it, and he's so creative and intelligent, and he gets wrestling and he gets what's entertaining. He's behind the podcast Escaping Denver,
Okay. Okay.
which
Yeah. Yeah.
the book just came out a while back, and I want to say there's a Hulu movie or TV show coming out. But again, like a very creative guy.
Yeah.
And then NEW is so ingrained in with like the Lionsgate Dojo, and that's where like Artemis Spencer trains, Nicole Matthews trains, Tony Baroni. Like there's so many top tier Canadian wrestlers there, and then NEW is just that amplified, and then bringing in outside names. So there's so much good wrestling like in Canada, and like
Yeah.
those are two that really stand out. And Destroy Wrestling as well is
Nice.
another one that's just incredibly chaotic, always bringing in like random names and like I don't know, kind of the disruptor in a sense, where
Nice.
you never know quite what you're going to get at one of those shows, but you know you're going to be entertained for the 2 or 3 hours that you're there.
Yeah. So when I talk your career, your resume keeps going and going. I'm curious for you, how does prestige wrestling happen for you?
That was another one where I almost felt like, in a weird way, that it was like, oh, was I holding the scene back? Because it was like as soon as I was gearing up to like leave for India for 6 months, Defy starts, and then while I'm over there, I get a message from Will from Prestige, and he's like, "Oh, hey, like, I'd like to book you on the show." And I was like, "Well, I'm kind of on the other side of the world right now. I
Yeah.
physically could not be further from you right now, but I would love to be a part of it." And again, I'm like outside this bubble looking in, and I'm seeing like who they're bringing in and being like, okay, well, I could work a program with that guy, and like, oh, I've never wrestled them
Mhm.
before. Trying to see like where I fit in, And I got lucky that as I was coming back, I just kind of offhandedly messaged Will, and he had a show coming up, and I was like, "Oh, hey, like I'm going to be back in the area, like this date. Feel free to reach out to me for whatever you have planned." And literally, like that week I got back, he was like, "Do you want to do the show, bro?" I was like, "Sure."
Nice.
And and bless him, he like just threw me on, and it was a triple threat match. It was me, Sin Bodhi, and
Wow.
PCO in a triple threat match,
Yeah.
and because he just wanted me on the show, and it was
Nice.
again, it was just fun. It was chaotic. It was in every way a blast, and I love that Prestige just really figured out how to carve out their own space
Hmm.
where it's very fan service heavy in a way that's different than Defy, where Defy maybe is bringing in like, oh, like they have the AEW plug. Like Prestige is like bringing in people that like you wouldn't think they'd be able to grab.
Nice. Yeah.
And I think there's just something very cool about like Will being able to like reach out to people like as soon as they're released, or guys who just haven't done the indies in a while or do one offs, that he's able to like finagle and get them. And a lot of that is because like, and again, like the way a wrestler cares about their craft, you put on matches that entertain your audience. Will understands that like his craft is booking and promoting, and in turn, his audience gets these really cool shows and really unique matchups out of it. And
Yeah.
he listens to his audience. It's not just, oh, I think this guy's cool, I'm going to bring him in. It's, oh man, a lot of people are tweeting about this girl, I should bring her in. And
Wow.
then doing what he has to do to make that happen. And I think that's it's very cool. It's very commendable. And in turn, like I've gotten to wrestle a lot of very cool and unique matches. Like I always
Yeah.
joke that like I'm kind of low key the MVP of his Roseland shows because I have such a varied like list of people that I've wrestled on those shows. Like I wrestled Scotty Too Hottie, I wrestled Nick Wayne, I
Nice.
wrestled Kikutaru, I had a fatal four way with like Susumu Yokosuka and a
Wow.
couple other guys on Dragon Gate. Like every, I feel like every show, like I end up doing something drastically different than the
Yeah.
last time I was there.
Nice. I'm curious, when you talk about going to India, when you came back, well, when you were there, was wrestling just always on your mind? And what was like the mindset when you came right back from India?
Getting back from India, I really wanted to hit the ground running.
Nice. Yeah.
I, at the time, had a little bit of a buzz just because I tried to stay very active on social media
Nice.
with everything going on over there. Because I didn't want to be lost in the shuffle
Yeah.
and be forgotten about. And you're not doing shows, but it's like I can still pop up in your Twitter feed, your Instagram feed. And so I just tried to stay really active and prevalent there. But it really was being on the outside looking in. It was kind of nice because I think sometimes when you're in the bubble, you have a hard time grasping the full picture of like what's going on. You're
Yeah.
just focused on, oh, I got this show in Portland, I got this show in Vancouver. Okay, cool. I'm wrestling this guy and this guy. Cool. All right, I have an idea of what I want to do. And being on the outside and you're looking at these cards as a whole and going like, oh man, there's a lot of the same thing happening. Or like, why is nobody doing this? And so I think being able to come back and just be like, hey, I have a bunch of fresh ideas. I have a whole lot of different takes. I think it was in a lot of ways like a blessing in disguise to be able to take time off without being forgotten, but not have to be hurt in order to
Yeah.
take that time off.
Yeah. I'm curious your career. When you talk about wrestling, being the DOA heavyweight champion, 420 days in indie wrestling, we don't usually see reigns like that. So for you personally, what does that reign mean for you?
To me, it means a lot. That
Yeah.
was the first time anybody really trusted me to not just main event, but to be you're a focal point of this.
Yeah.
You know, you're being like a kind of essentially the main heel.
Yeah.
You know, or like I don't want to say the top heel, but kind of. I mean, I was the champion, so yeah,
Yeah.
yes, top heel. Um, but at that point, it's on you to sell every single babyface we put you up against that they're a credible threat to your championship. And again, that was part of the reason why I wanted to be a bit like cowardly and a bit kind of a vulnerable champion is because building that idea that at any time anybody can knock me off,
Hmm.
you know, and the longer it goes, the more frustrated the fans get, the more like, you know, every time somebody gets close, they're like, this has to be the one. And
Yeah.
I think that like led a lot of longevity to my reign was the fact that I was in a position where because of the character I was portraying, I could convince just about anybody that, oh, this is the time he loses the title, you know, and yeah, again, just very lucky in that sense.
Is
And
oh, I was
oh,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
is there a defense that stands out for you?
Yeah, I would say out of all of them, and it's probably not the one that garnered the most views, but it was the one to me where I felt confident. Like as
Nice.
far as we got past the experimental phase, we're in the weeds of like this is working.
Yeah.
And I was wrestling this wrestler Quiz, who's all over like Portland, Texas, and he was in every way my rival, and we meshed so well. And we
Nice.
ended up having a steel cage match, which aren't very common on the indies because they're just a nightmare to set up.
Yeah.
And that I think for a lot of people, that was the moment they believed that like, oh, he's gonna lose the title. It's a cage match. This is his rival, top babyface.
Yeah.
Could not be a bigger deal. And I think not only did we go out there and exceed expectations, we also had a very different cage match because earlier in the night they had a cage match and there's blood and guts everywhere. And so again, I was like, we're not going to outbleed these guys in this
Mhm.
cage, so let's not bother. But like, can we outdazzle these guys? Absolutely, we can. Can we have more drama? Absolutely, we can.
Yeah.
And we leaned into that, and we just got very creative. And I was very happy with it because at the end of it, I won, and I just remember the crowd booing, and it was a genuine, not we hate this boo, but a just you took the wind out of our sails boo. That
Yeah.
we were on board the whole way. We hook, line, and sinker believe you were losing, and you ruined it for us. You took that away from us,
Nice.
and I was like, we have them. I was like,
Yeah.
I have them. We pulled this off. And I think that was like, I can get this reaction and close out the show this way every single show. And I can get these people to come back next month and still have them believe that this is the one Ethan's going to lose on. And so I think that
Nice.
was the moment where it went from being an experiment to being this works. Let's keep running.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you talk about your career, you can see the passion for pro wrestling you have, but what is it like for you after all these years to give back in pro wrestling and train the next generation of pro wrestlers?
I love it.
Yeah.
And it's something that was never really like, I hate the cliche, it was never on my bingo card,
Yeah.
but it was never anything I looked at until I got the opportunity to go over to Khali's in India and coach. And I think over time, really good at it. I was very lucky that, I had Ricardo Rodriguez, who was a prior coach, and now he coaches at the Three Legacy School.
Yeah.
He was helping me out. Daryl Sharma's an NXT referee now. He was a prior coach. He helped me out. Matt Ecstatic was there. Like, there was a lot of guys who came before me who gave me a lot of good advice and showed me how this works. And so I got a very good understanding, got a real crash course in it. And it was 5 days a week, 3 classes every day. And you just, by the end of it, you get good at it and you figure out how to explain things, especially when there's a language barrier and you're trying to figure out, like, how do I convey not just the physical aspects of wrestling, but the psychology of wrestling, the theatrical aspect? How do you convey that to somebody when you both collectively have about 30 words in common that you know?
Yeah.
You learn how to build on that. And
Nice.
yeah, I just ended up getting a real knack for it, and it's something I'm very passionate about. And I would say, other than doing commentary, like wrestling coaching is kind of like whenever I'm done actively performing,
Mhm.
this is the thing that I want to keep doing in the business as long as I'm allowed.
Yeah. So there's a few things you talk about I want to get into quick. What was it like teaching at Great Khali School? And is there anything about wrestling in India that you think stands out for you?
Man.
Do they have a
So,
lot of wrestling?
so there wasn't really a lot of wrestling
Okay.
out there. Like, namely, there weren't any, but there was nobody out there who had the money to invest in a school that had name recognition and that could also act like properly teach how to
Yeah.
do it. And there's just a lot of money up front to start a wrestling school. And so Cully, put in the money and gave a lot of people opportunities to
Nice.
blow up and make it out of India. Shanky, he was with Jinder for a while on
Yeah.
SmackDown. He was one of my students from Cully's school. Kavita Devi was the first Indian woman she did the first ever Evolution Battle Royal.
Nice.
And so she was in that, did a few matches in NXT. And like a few other students like got a chance to blow up out of there. And it was a cool experience. It was a crash course for me, learning how to balance out the language barrier and all
Yeah.
that. Um, I can't say enough good things about it. And it was also just, I think, fascinating getting to just hang out with Great Khali.
Yeah.
And like he's, and I wish more people could know this. truly one of the most low-key funny people you'll ever meet.
Is there any stories that stand out with Great Khali?
Oh man, I'll be honest, there's a few, probably none that I can probably publicly say.
Yeah,
Like the good ones, I probably couldn't publicly say.
yeah,
Not that there's anything terrible, but
yeah,
I think my favorite Cully story was I was trying to show him like because it was right when he was first getting on like Instagram and starting to blow up, and I was trying to show him how like Snapchat worked, and because like over in India, WhatsApp is really big,
okay,
and I was like, oh, Snapchat's kind of like that, and I was showing him like how it works. I'm trying to explain it, and I was like, oh, you can do filters. And I'm trying to explain what a filter is. And so finally, I just took a picture of him with like the old Instagram like dog filter where the ears come
yeah,
down and like the tongue comes out. And I take the picture and I show it to him. And he like looks at it for like a good like 15 seconds. Like he's really analyzing this thing.
yeah.
And then he looks at me and goes, delete it.
I love it.
Yeah, but yeah, low key, just like a really dry sense of humor kind of
Nice.
guy, but
Yeah,
like, but very aware of how people look at him and perceive him. And like in India, like he does a lot of commercials, and they're all hysterical because he gets comedy. He's like
yeah,
genuinely like a really funny guy.
yeah. What else? So when we talk about teaching, what was it like teaching the dojo in New Zealand?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
I was again and just very lucky to have an opportunity to do it. And I'm a big believer that your current performance is also your audition for your next job.
Okay.
And the reason I got that gig is because of what I had done at Khali's.
Wow.
Is Fale had reached out to a mutual of myself and him, this guy Tony Kazina, and said, "Hey Tony, like I want you to come out to my school and train." And Tony's like, "Oh, I'm busy right now. I don't have time, but I know this guy Ethan. He did a thing in India." And Fale looked me up and said, "Sure, the CV checks out."
Yeah.
And he had reached out to me, and so I got the opportunity to go over there. I was the first Gaijin coach of a New Japan dojo.
Yeah.
And again, just a very cool experience. It was a much smaller class, which was
Yeah.
nice, but there was a lot more free reign because like over there, it's very much we just want people that can be athletes, like that
Hmm.
can hang. And so day one, the warm up was 1,000 squats,
Okay.
and you just have and you don't obviously you should do them. You want to do as many as you can, but it's really just more of a test to see how you handle things that are challenging.
Okay. Yeah.
And falling straight up was like, if you tell somebody to do 1,000 squats and they go, "Oh, I can't do 1,000 squats," and they don't try, that person has no, they're not going to make it.
Hmm.
But if you tell somebody to do 1,000 squats and they go, "Okay," and at 200 their legs turn to jello and they get out, you know what? That's somebody who did as much as they could. That is somebody who gave maximum effort. And that is somebody who can prosper in wrestling, somebody you can coach, somebody who can get better at this. And to me, like that was like again like one of those light bulb moments.
Yeah.
You go, oh man, yeah. Like it's not just about being an athlete or like having like an aptitude for it. It's are you willing to attempt things that you probably can't do, just in case you can, or see how far you can get and how far you
Yeah.
can push yourself. And it was again such a light bulb moment, and it really changed the way that like I look at coaching people or training people. That just because somebody walks in and like, oh, they used to be a D1 athlete, doesn't mean they're going to be all that coachable in wrestling,
Hmm.
or they're a bodybuilder, doesn't mean they'll be all that coachable. Versus somebody who's just like, I really want to learn this, and I really want to get good at this, and I will take as long as it takes to get good at it. I will come in every day and give my maximum effort.
Yeah.
And it's like those are the people that I end up, as I've learned over the years, a lot of times those are the people that end up sticking it out. And the people that you look in who are like, oh, you thought this guy was going to make it because he's jacked, but he only trained because everybody at the gym told him he should be a wrestler.
Wow. Yeah.
Versus somebody who wanted it and is willing to do whatever the steps are to get to that goal.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was like my biggest takeaway getting to
Nice.
coach at college.
I'm curious, when you talk about your pro wrestling journey, you got to do something pretty cool. To you, what does it mean? Pro Wrestling Illustrated, I think it was 487 in 2014 and then like 247 in 2012. To you, man, what does that mean? You put in the work and you're up there. And for the 247, that was pretty high for an indie guy too at the time.
Yeah, so it's funny. So the and this is the thing I was on. So and I forget which came first, but the year I ended up in the 400s,
At 2012, I
I
think.
2012, I had messaged them because I had a friend who told me, "Oh, if you just email them, like, and you give them your CV already written out, chances are they'll just throw you on
Yeah.
because it's really like that top 100 is kind of what gets looked at, and then it's really just filling out the rest.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, sure, right. So I threw it out there, and then but then like the year that I ranked like 280 or whatever it was, I didn't email them, and I thought it was so much weird at the time. I didn't put any effort.
Yeah.
They ranked me higher than when I actively reached out
Love it.
and was like, "Oh, I'd really love to be a part of this." Because I
Yeah.
think every indie guy who knows he's not going to be number one in the 500, secretly you want to be number 500.
Oh yeah, everyone
Like,
says it.
right? Like 1 through 10 is the sweet spot, and then 500 is like the other sweet spot.
Yeah.
Everything in the middle is kind of like you're just page filler, man.
Yeah. I'm curious, you talk about you love training pro wrestlers, but you love commentary. When did that interest come for you?
So that came about honestly at a really good time for me, especially at Defy.
Okay.
Is I I come back from the pandemic and I was now a solo guy. Mike Santiago hadn't come back yet.
Okay.
And I was trying to find again, like, where do I fit in here now? Because for so long we were just the de facto tag team, and that's no longer the case. And so there was a lot of experimenting. And like, and kudos to Defy. They gave me some great opportunities. Again, I got to wrestle the Briscoe brothers in a
Yeah.
tag team. I wrestled Eddie Kingston, I wrestled Homicide, wrestled Jordan Oliver, like wrestled Titus Alexander. I got to do like, a lot of cool matches. But I could also see that they're also trying to figure out where does this guy fit in.
Yeah.
And bless Rich Bocchini, he had thrown it out there to ask if I want to sit in doing commentary, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm guessing I did something or said something that gave
Yeah.
him like like, oh, he's got an aptitude for this. And yeah, so he ended up like asking the fight like, oh, could Ethan do like if he's wrestling on the first half, come in and sit on the back half, and then that just led to like somebody they asked me like, do you want to just do the whole show? And I was like, absolutely.
Nice.
Like if this is where I fit and where I can be a part of this, absolutely. You
Nice.
know, and again, like it was cool like doing something like that and staying again, like you're in front of people, you're part of the show, you're still actively in everybody's mind,
Yeah.
even if you're not wrestling on the show. And again, it was great to be able to take that step back and really look at the landscape of everything and go like,
Yeah.
man, like I noticed that I have to find different ways to reword the same spot because these guys keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, okay, so I know when I'm doing other shows, don't do these things because for sure somebody's got these bases covered.
Hmm.
Or can I figure out a way to do it so it doesn't feel like, oh, we just saw that one match or two matches ago?
Yeah. Is there a favorite
And
match you got to call?
oh man, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Favorite I got to call. Ye- Yes. And I feel
Okay.
bad. I don't remember everybody in it. It was when Defy had a weekend of shows with TJPW, DDT, and Defy.
Okay.
And Ravenous Randy and Dan Shokudino had a match that I think might, out of all of Dino's matches, might be top five gayest matches.
Yeah, okay.
And which I think for Dino, that's,
Yeah.
high
Yeah.
praise. Um, and it was so good because it was everything Ravenous Randy does well as a character and everything Dino does well as a character. And it came together so perfectly. And it was so fun to call because there was no pressure. Like you have
Yeah.
to call what you see. And again, you can't be zanier than the action. If two guys are beating the hell out of each other, you have to treat that as serious.
Hmm.
But when somebody is, trying to like, do stuff to your
Yeah.
opponent, you have a real freedom to just be as colorful as they are with
Nice.
your verbiage.
Yeah.
And it was such just like a fun match to call. I feel like it's very hard for me to get Rich to laugh. And anytime I feel like I can crack him up and I can get him to hit the mute button, I always take that as a victory. And that might have
Nice.
been the greatest victory of my life.
Wow. I'm curious for you. You talk about training, you talk about commentary. Does Ethan HD have any current goals in pro wrestling?
That's a good question. And I honestly don't know if I have an answer. It's something
Okay.
I've truly been pondering.
Yeah.
This October will be 20 years as a pro.
Wow.
And I've truly done more than I ever thought
Nice.
I would do in wrestling. I really went in truly no expectations. I feel like it's so hard in wrestling to have a 5-year plan because everything changes so frequently and so quickly. You look at the indie scene 5 years before AEW started up. None of those people could have known that this was
Yeah.
their trajectory. Some of those people weren't even training yet.
Yeah. That's
And
crazy. Yeah.
I think, like in wrestling, you just have to actively every day get a little bit better, learn more skills, learn more things. And then as these opportunities come up, as this business constantly evolves and shifts, things change, people leave, companies open, and be ready for that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I inherently have like a laser focused target goal of what my next step is. I want to do more wrestling that's not wrestling. I want to do
Okay.
more coaching. I want to do more commentary. I want to learn how to produce. I want to learn all of these things that aren't this right here in the ring.
Yeah.
And so I know that's kind of a non-answer
Yeah.
answer
No.
is everything, but truly to explore what there is outside of these ropes and wrestling for me.
Yeah. Well, Ethan, I want to thank you for joining me. You talk about hitting 20 years in pro wrestling. I'm 20, so for me to reach out to you, man, thank you so much for saying yes to doing this.
I felt that in my knees. I could feel that in my withered old knees.
Well,
But thank you so much for having me on here.
absolutely, Ethan. Now, I've ended every interview the same. You've accomplished so much in pro wrestling. You've done a lot, wrestled some of the best, won championships, coach gave back. But I'm curious for you, Ethan, when it's all said and done, which isn't happening anytime soon, what do you want Ethan HC's legacy in pro wrestling to be?
Honestly, I would love for my legacy to be somebody that just gets talked about.
Nice.
And not necessarily just by fans, but by wrestlers.
Yeah.
I hope that the knowledge that I'm imparting on my students are things that trickle down for decades and decades and generations. I think that's my true goal is for my name to long outlive my physical form.
Yeah.
In the way that Buddy Wayne, even after he passed, so many people talk about him
Hmm.
in the present tense. So many people that he's touched or trained or worked with still talk about him or have
Yeah.
buddyisms and buddy stories. And it's this man has been gone for years now, and still people talk about him and they laugh and it brightens up a room and people learn from these stories and jokes. And I think that's really what I would love for my legacy to be
Nice.
is somebody who, even when their presence is no longer there, the mention of them like brings a certain energy or positivity to the room.
Yeah. I want to thank you for joining me, man. When I thought of Washington for some of the top wrestlers, I did so much research and you checked like all the boxes I was looking for. So thank you, man, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, I appreciate for having me on. It's been
Thank you.
great.
Thank you, Ethan, for doing this. And thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. This was Best for Business.
Thank you for watching this episode of Best for Business. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, because this is Best for Business.